I can still remember every second of that night, like my body memorized it more than my mind did. It was one of those evenings that started out so ordinary. We'd all had dinner together. My parents, a few of their friends, and him. He'd been around forever, almost like family though not quite. Older than me by a good stretch. Confident in that quiet way that always made me notice him even when I tried not to. We'd opened a couple of bottles of wine, laughing over stories I'd heard a dozen times before. And yet I'd caught myself looking at him too often, at the way his mouth curved when he smiled, the way his hand rested so casually on the back of his chair. It felt reckless how much I noticed. By the time everyone was getting ready for bed, the night had taken on that soft, heavy stillness that only happens in a house full of sleeping people. He hadn't planned to stay over, but it was late and my dad insisted. The guest room was already taken, so we ended up with the pull-out couch in the living room. "Don't worry," he'd said, helping me unfold it. "You take one side, I'll take the other. We're adults, it's fine." But the second we slid under the same blanket, it didn't feel fine at all. There was barely a foot of space between us. I could hear every shift of his body, every quiet exhale. The dim light from the hallway traced the shape of his shoulders, the rise and fall of his chest. I closed my eyes and told myself to sleep, but my body wouldn't listen. My heart beat too fast, my skin felt too warm. Every nerve was alive with awareness of how close he was. And then I felt it. The faintest brush. Like his hand had drifted closer to mine. I froze. I didn't open my eyes. Didn't move. I just lay there, perfectly still, pretending. Inside it felt like fire spreading through my veins. I wanted him to touch me. I ached for it so badly it hurt. But he didn't move again. His breathing stayed steady, maybe a little slower now. I could feel it though, his attention, the way the air seemed charged between us. And that's when I realized he knew I wasn't asleep. I don't know when it started. This quiet wanting that I tried so hard to ignore. He'd always been around. Cookouts in the backyard, holiday dinners, nights when he'd stop by just to have a drink with my dad. To everyone else, he was just a close family friend. But to me, he was different. When I was younger, I'd look up to him, admiring the way he carried himself, confident, warm, the kind of man who made everyone feel seen. As I got older, that admiration shifted into something else, something I didn't dare name. He never crossed any lines, never gave me reason to believe he saw me the same way. Maybe that's what made it worse, wanting something that felt so impossible, so wrong. I kept it hidden well. Smiling politely when he'd catch my eye across the dinner table. Pretending my chest didn't tighten when his hand brushed mine passing a plate. Acting like my pulse didn't skip when he'd lean in close to tell a joke just to me. But that night something felt different. Maybe it was the wine, or the way we'd laughed just a little too long together while cleaning up. Maybe it was how his gaze lingered on me, just for a moment, like he was seeing me. Not as the girl he'd known for years, but as a woman. So when we ended up sharing that couch, my head was already spinning. The air between us felt heavier than usual, full of everything I'd never said. Lying there, pretending to be asleep, I could feel the pull of him like gravity. Every nerve in my body was screaming for him to notice me. And that tiny brush of his hand, it undid me completely. It was nothing, and yet it was everything. I didn't dare open my eyes. I didn't dare move closer. But every cell in me was begging for him to close the space between us. And as I lay there, heart pounding in my throat, I wondered, if he touched me again, would I be able to keep pretending? The room was too quiet, every sound magnified. The ticking clock on the wall, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, his breathing slow, steady, but somehow different now. I couldn't tell if minutes or hours were passing. All I knew was the weight of his presence next to me. My body was hypersensitive. Every shift of the blanket, every brush of fabric felt like a spark. I thought about what it would feel like if he actually reached for me. If his hand slid over mine, if his fingers curled just slightly, telling me everything without a single word. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but I tried to make them sound like sleep. My lips felt dry. My skin tingled like it was waiting for something inevitable. And then, there it was. The lightest touch, so faint I almost wondered if I imagined it. His fingers grazed the back of my hand, lingering for just a second longer than they should have. Heat shot through me so fast I almost flinched. But I stayed still, kept my eyes shut, pretending. He didn't pull away. Slowly, almost uncertainly, his fingers traced along mine again, so careful, as if testing how much I'd let him get away with. I wanted to grab his hand to tell him I was awake, that I wanted this more than I could admit. But the thrill of pretending was stronger. The risk, the unspoken danger, it made every second electric. My pulse was so loud in my ears that I didn't notice I'd started holding my breath. His hand stilled, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then I felt it, his fingers lacing with mine, slow, deliberate. I swear in that quiet room, I could feel his heartbeat through his touch. And that's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. He wasn't just testing me. He wanted me to. The moment his fingers threaded through mine, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just a touch anymore, it was a choice. His choice. Mine too, even if I was still pretending to sleep. My heart pounded so violently I thought he'd feel it through my hand. The heat of his skin seeped into me, grounding me and setting me on fire all at once. I didn't move. Couldn't. But every part of me screamed to turn toward him, to erase the tiny space that felt unbearable now. His thumb brushed gently over my knuckles, slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing the shape of my hand. It was such a small thing, but it sent a shiver through my entire body. I felt his weight shift slightly. The mattress dipped just barely. I knew he was leaning closer, and the awareness of his nearness made my breath falter. I could sense him watching me. His gaze heavy, lingering on my face, maybe searching for a sign. Part of me wanted to open my eyes, to meet him halfway, to let everything unravel right there. But the other part, the one intoxicated by this forbidden, fragile game, stayed still. His breath grazed my cheek. Warm. Careful. And then I felt it. His lips brushing against my hairline. The faintest, most tentative kiss. It was nothing and everything all at once. 1,000 thoughts screamed in my head. This was wrong. Dangerous. If anyone knew. But in that moment nothing existed except the way my body trembled from a single touch, a single kiss. And as he lingered there, close enough for me to feel his breath against my skin, I knew we had crossed a line we could never uncross. He didn't move away. Neither did I. And that silence between us, thick, charged, full of everything unspoken, felt like the start of something we wouldn't be able to stop. I felt him hesitate, like he was giving me one last chance to pull away, to open my eyes, to end it. But I stayed perfectly still, my hand still tangled in his, my breath shallow and shaky. When his lips brushed my temple this time, they lingered. My skin tingled, my whole body tightening with anticipation. Every inch of me screamed to turn to him, to let it happen completely, to feel what I'd only imagined 1,000 times before. Slowly, carefully, his hand released mine and moved, light as air, tracing the line of my arm. My skin erupted in goosebumps, my pulse hammering at my throat. He stopped as if waiting for me to react. But I didn't. I couldn't. I just let him. When his hand found my waist, my breath caught so sharply I was afraid it gave me away. His fingers rested there, not moving, as if he was silently asking a question. I stayed still, but inside I was burning. Then slowly he leaned closer. His forehead nearly touched mine, his breath mingling with mine. My lips parted just slightly, instinctively. I could feel it, the moment right before the world changes. That fragile line between wanting and having. I knew if I turned my head just an inch, if I opened my eyes, if I let it happen, there would be no going back. And yet my body betrayed me. My head tilted ever so slightly, barely enough for him to notice. But he noticed. The softest sound left his throat, like relief and desire mixed into one. And then finally his lips found mine. Not rushed. Not greedy. Just slow, searching, like he'd wanted this as long as I had. The world outside that blanket didn't exist anymore. And the moment our lips touched, I knew there was no pretending anymore. The kiss was soft, tentative, like we were both afraid the moment would shatter if we pushed too far, too fast. But the second I felt the warmth of his mouth on mine, every bit of restraint I'd been clinging to unraveled. My lips moved against his, answering what I'd been too afraid to say out loud. He froze for a heartbeat, probably realizing I'd been awake all along. And then he kissed me back. There was no mistaking it now, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a dream. His hand at my waist tightened, pulling me the smallest bit closer. I turned toward him fully, my eyes still closed, surrendering to the gravity that had been pulling us together for years. The kiss deepened slowly, like he was memorizing every angle, every breath. My fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, clutching him without thinking. Every inch of me was awake, alive, trembling. My chest pressed to his, my pulse pounding in my ears. The world felt impossibly small, like it existed only here, between the two of us under that blanket, in the quiet of a sleeping house. We kissed until breathing became impossible, and when he finally pulled back just slightly, our foreheads stayed pressed together. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. In that silence, with his hand still holding me like I was something fragile and precious, I felt it: relief, desire, and something else I didn't dare name yet. Because as much as I wanted him, as much as my body burned for more, a sharp ache of guilt twisted in my chest. We weren't supposed to be here. Not like this. And yet, when he kissed me again, slower, deeper, with a kind of quiet hunger, I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. Not anymore. Time stopped mattering after that. We kissed like two people who had been holding back for far too long, slow, searching, afraid to let go but unable to stop. Every movement was careful, restrained, but full of everything we hadn't dared to say. His hand stayed gentle, tracing the curve of my back as though he was memorizing every inch. Every touch sent heat racing through me, leaving me trembling and breathless. I pressed closer, my fingers sliding over his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under my palm. There was a softness to him that night, as if he was terrified of breaking me or breaking what we were becoming. At one point I opened my eyes just barely and found him watching me. That look, hungry, vulnerable, almost reverent, stole the air from my lungs. I couldn't believe this was real. That he wanted me the way I'd wanted him all this time. Every kiss, every hesitant touch, was a silent confession. We were both too afraid to speak because words would make it real, and reality would mean facing what this truly was. So we stayed quiet. And when I finally laid my head against his chest, feeling his arms wrapped tightly around me, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just want him tonight. I wanted him completely. That thought stayed with me long after our kisses slowed and his breathing evened out, his hand still resting protectively against my side. And as I drifted toward sleep, a part of me wondered, what would happen when the morning came? I woke up to the pale light of dawn filtering through the curtains, my head still resting on his chest. For a moment I didn't move, hoping to stay in that fragile bubble where the night still belonged to us. But then I felt it, his fingers gently brushing through my hair. He knew I was awake. I tilted my head up to look at him, expecting awkwardness, regret, anything that would make the night feel like a mistake. Instead, he was smiling softly, his eyes warm in a way that made my heart ache. "You weren't asleep," he said quietly, his voice low and certain. It wasn't a question. I felt my face flush, but I couldn't bring myself to lie. "No," I whispered. Something flickered in his expression, relief, maybe even happiness. "I know," he said simply. We just stared at each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. And in that moment I realized the truth. Last night hadn't been an accident. It had been a choice. For both of us. I didn't know what would happen next, or how we would face the world outside that living room. But as his thumb brushed softly over my cheek, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I didn't regret a single second of it. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is finally admit what you've wanted all along.